Welcome, critters! I'm Claire Jones, your devoted host of the Sacred Reading CR podcast, where we discuss and examine Critical Role episodes, plotlines, characters, and players through the lens of sacred reading practices. And this particular episode is about Campaign 1, Episode 20, Part 1. And joining me today is Petall!
Hello!
Hello. All right, so the icebreaker for today is, if the zombie apocalypse is coming, who are the 3 people you want on your team?
Oh, are these like real people or fictional people?
I think all of the above.
Nice. Okay. I would first like Vexalia, because I think that she'd be really good at resource management and also really good at taking out zombies from a distance. So I think even if I could just choose one person, I would choose Vex, because I feel like she would increase my chances of survival exponentially.
Yeah.
Let's see, who else would I want? I think also it would be good to also have somebody who can do healing. So I think Caduceus would be a lot of fun to spend time around. I think he'd be very good too at keeping everybody like calm and chill and all that. I think that would be great. And as for my third person, I'm just thinking so far I've done one from campaign 2, one from campaign 1. Maybe I should choose somebody from campaign 3 for my third person. I didn't intend to all go Critical Role, but that's the way that it's going.
I'm here for it.
And then as for my third person, let's do I just think Laudna would be a lot of fun to be around. She's, I mean, a little bit of like a zombie herself, but in a fun way, and I think she would have a lot of fun and really like decorate our little like space. It might be odd decorations, but I think she'd be really good at making use of what we'd be able to find to be able to decorate whatever bunker we're hiding out into to survive this zombie apocalypse. Those are my 3. Vex, Caduceus, and Laudna.
Yeah. I mean, to be fair, I never prepare my answers to these questions ahead of time, even though I think I should. But I always come up with my answer on the fly. And so I was totally thinking of like in real life people when I was thinking about this, but I think I'm going to change my answers based on your answers. Like I think the Vex concept I think is really on point, but I'm a resource manager, so I need a fighter on my team. So I'm thinking like Vax probably would be a good one to choose for that, because he can do distance as well as melee, you know. Maybe Percy instead of Vex or Vax. But I just thought of like Henry Cavill, because like he's buff as fuck. He can fight a bunch of different things. He's also like that nerdy builder type, so I can see him like building like DIY Wi-Fi networks.
Yeah,
something like that. Plus, we can repopulate the world together, you know, in case that happens. But then I think my third person would actually have to be like Martha Stewart.
Nice.
She's a stoner like me, you know, she smokes with Snoop Dogg, but she can also like make anything out of anything, and she's like a gardener, you know. So she could be like the baker gardener person who just like makes sure we all stay alive and happy.
Nice.
But I almost went with Buffy the Vampire Slayer for like that first fighter type, but she has so much drama, like personal drama going on, that, like, I don't need that on my team.
Yeah, that's fair.
All right, so please join us as we embark on this exciting adventure in story analysis and self-reflection in order to deepen our understanding of ourselves and the world around us. And as always, we love hearing your own insights and stories as well, so please comment, like, share below. And then, ready? All right, let's dive in. Vox Machina have been split into two groups as part of a double contract offered by the Slayer's Take in Vasselheim. We are now joining the second group, comprised of Keyleth, Vax, and Tiberius, and they start the episode with them waiting in the tavern for word of what their contract will be. Tiberius and Keyleth try to cheer Vax up for being separated from Vex for the time being, and Tiberius says that he doesn't want to be hanging around these peasants. He asks for some drinks from the bartender, and they take a quick inventory of what healing potions they have on hand. They also discover that Tiberius is holding onto the group's flying carpet. They decide to go look for potions and other supplies to purchase, finding a small tent with a fortune teller. Tiberius approaches, recognizing the tent, and Keyleth greets the fortune teller warmly, calling her Trista. The fortune teller tells her that Trista is her sister, but her name is Forsythia. Her visage does shimmer and fade to reveal a gnarled hag, and she greets Tiberius, saying that she can tell that a piece of him is still missing, which was apparently her fortune to him previously, pre-stream. And he replies, saying that he still doesn't know what that means, but is happy to see her. He asks her again about something called the Boris Ring, as well as something called the Pale Stone, but she tells him that she thinks one quest is enough for the time being. She does seem frustrated, but offers them some baubles if they are interested. Tiberius asks them about potions, and she shows them 2 healing potions as well as 1 vial of caustic liquid. He buys them all, and Keyleth asks if she's willing to do any readings, but she declines and says that she is too depleted. Vax asks if she's available for trades, asking if she has any poisons. She offers a vial of black liquid and asks for a favor in return, perhaps down the road. He agrees, and a cold shiver runs down his back. She tells them to leave, and they head out as her form shifts back into the beautiful elven mask that she was wearing previously. Vax grabs a passerby to ask about more potions and is told that most of the potion trade is controlled by the clergy of the city, since it's a divine city. They get directed to the closest temple, but Vax grumpily advocates for just heading to the Slayer's Take and starting their contract to get it over with. Merton greets them as they arrive at the take and wishes them luck in getting a better contract than the rest of their group. They ask what the other contract was for and get told that it was for a white dragon. They panic for a bit, but Tiberius insists they will be fine. He goes and retrieves Vanessa, the headmaster, who then introduces them to their additional group members, played by Will Wheaton and Will Friedle. Kashaw, the human cleric, played by Will Friedle, is the acolyte who is trying to earn entry into the guild. He complains about them being late, and Keyleth asks what he means in her usual bubbly demeanor. He asks Tiberius if she's always like this, who responds in the affirmative. They also are introduced to Thorbeer, the dwarven fighter played by Will Wheaton, who is the guild member that has been chosen as the leader for the group. Vanessa then tells them that their contract is for a Rakshasa, a type of demon that is usually from the 9 hells. They are notoriously difficult to find and destroy, looking like a usual humanoid man, but with the face of a tiger, and their hands are reversed. The guild has confirmed that there is one in the vicinity, but they are responsible for finding its exact location. Vax complains that they are expected to leave with no information, and Vanessa says that they are expected to display their competence in this task. Thorbeer says that they need to get going, and Tiberius threatens him with his army. Keyleth gets sad, saying that she thought this was going to be a fun field trip, and Kashaw says that he wants to switch teams. Thorbeer leads the way, and Kashaw casts Locate Creature on the Rakshasa, discovering that the entity is within 1,000 feet in a northeastern direction. They head in that direction after some more grumpy bickering between them all, and enter a section of the city called the Dusk Meadow, which is under the watchful eye of the Raven Queen. It houses her temple, the city's prison, as well as the crypts that hold the city's dead. Thorbeer asks or says that they should ask around to see if there has been anything unusual happening in the area, and they find a stand selling masks. They buy some and ask the proprietor for the local gossip. Apparently, some dead bastions were fished out of the water troughs on the outside of the Dusk Meadow. The bodies looked like they were mauled by a beast. They ask for more details, but she says that they would need to speak with the Bastions to get more information. Keyleth chooses a raven mask and Vax chooses a serpent mask, but Thorbeer hangs back while the others leave to ask for a mask that would fit a little girl. She offers him a small purple mask with fake gems and ribbons, which he does buy. Vax then asks Thorbeer about potions, but is told that they're hard to come by. So they head over to a couple of bastions, but Will Wheaton rolls a natural 1 on his intimidation check, thanks to the Wheaton curse. He then offers them 4 gold as Vax stealthily checks out one of the bastion's pockets. Vax does successfully steal a pouch of glass bottles off of the bastion, while the other complains that 4 gold is not enough for the bribe. Tiberius interrupts but is told off as well, while Thorbeer holds out another 10 gold in his hand but rolls a 6. So the Bastion gets nervous that he is literally being bribed in broad daylight and pulls them into an alley to tell them more information. He says that they have found several bodies a few months apart who have been eaten somehow with no signs of a beast coming or going from the city. They have been found wrapped up and discarded outside the Abundant Terrace, which is Melora's area. And the latest was a powerful merchant from Ank'Harel and Marquette named Lord Tyrell. A beggar caught sight of the actual murder, saying that the assailant was wolf-like but bipedal. The moment they realized they were seen, the figure vanished into thin air. Lord Tyrell had been staying at the Velvet Cabaret, which is a high-end establishment that they raided as a result, but found nothing there. They are told that all of the bodies have been well-to-do men and women, and that Lord Tyrell's trachea was missing. They then take their leave and head over to the Velvet Cabaret, discussing their options, but Wheaton rolls another natural 1 as he's checking to see if he remembers anything about Lord Tyrell. So Friedel rolls a dirty 20 on his check, telling him that he has heard about the Lord coming through the city every now and then. He is surprised that the murder has been kept so hush-hush, considering the Lord's notoriety. They decide to have Vax pose as a wealthy merchant, and Tiberius disguises himself as a high-born elf, while Keyleth shops for some better-looking attire. And that's where they break for the episode. So, what do we think of this first half?
Yeah, it is, I mean, all in all, for an episode that is before the Briarwood arc, this actually is the start of something pretty significant, given that this is the introduction of the famed Rakshasa. And I had actually forgotten, like, obviously I've listened to this part before, watched this part before, but I had forgotten that this is where it all began with the Rakshasa.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many seeds being planted in the Trial of the Take episodes. Like, this is the 3rd out of 4 Trial of the Take episodes. And there are so many things that are seeing their germination.
Yeah.
These episodes, like, I mean, even to go to the whole like Vax and Keyleth thing is really blossoming in this episode. We haven't really seen it yet, but it's coming. Kashaw's influence, like we talked a lot about Zara's influence in the earlier episodes.
Yeah.
You know, how much those characters stick around as the campaign goes on and influence the campaign that goes on. But you're right, too, in the sense of the Rakshasa. Like, he is a big figure in later stories as well.
Yeah. Yeah, and it is just interesting to see these little beginnings, as we've talked about before. Also, I do have to say, after having an episode without Orion that I got to talk about, it was a bit grating to have him back.
Yeah. I mean, just time and time again, he just does stuff that is grating. I mean, that's a good way to put it, is like putting my face against a cheese grater.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Like when you brought up the armies, like that's something that he does time and time again, is pretending he has all of these resources at his disposal without getting like confirmation from Matt whether he can actually have those resources, and just wanting to like swoop in with the whole army of Draconia and save the day.
Yeah, yeah. And the fact that he threatens Thorbeer with his army when they're
Yeah.
supposed to be working together,
Mm-hmm.
not an auspicious start.
No, not a good start at all. But we also got another moment where it seemed like Matt kind of like told, or at least like Matt told Tiberius off for like attempting to interrupt something that was going on with another player.
Especially when you're dealing with guest players too. Like
Mm-hmm.
obviously Will Wheaton is an experienced player, whereas Will Friedle is not experienced. Is it his first game? Same with Mary Elizabeth, I think.
I'm not actually sure.
Yeah, I don't know whether it's Friedel's first game or not, but he is a relative newbie to the system if it's not his
Mm-hmm.
first. And it is interesting to see how the two groups welcomed not only newbie players, but newbie characters as well. And I think it says a
Yeah.
lot about their characters as characters
Mm-hmm.
um, to be faced with new people, new situations, new expectations too, because even within the whole guild contract system, that's also a expectation that they're not necessarily used to either in terms of,
Yeah.
because the buyer of this contract that they're now completing for this Rakshasa is anonymous. They don't know who is putting this up for them. And
Mm-hmm.
that bothered them as well.
Yeah. Yeah, I think, I mean, it may just be because like Orion is here, but it's interesting to see the differences in how both parties like dealt with these situations. And I mean, like they both struggled with it. We talked about it last time I was on, like just especially with the conflict between like Vex and Zara. Whereas this one, a lot of the way it like seemed a bit more cohesive, except for when Orion tried to like butt his head in. And then
Mhm.
also there were a few comments about like being annoyed that Keyleth wanted to go shopping.
Mhm.
Um, which I found those comments annoying, especially because like we regularly get episodes where the players get shopping. It's not like a big deal. It's not something that's just like girly and like
Yeah. Yeah.
boring. There's
Oh,
actually
she's at a disadvantage as the only femme character in this particular group,
it's
too.
true.
That's
And
the other
they're
really noticeable thing.
Yeah, and it's earlier on, so they haven't like built that dynamic, and Marisha is still like at the beginning of getting all of the huge amount of backlash that she got at the beginning just for being her and for playing Keyleth the way that she played Keyleth.
Mhm.
And so that really was something that stuck out to me when they were like criticizing her wanting to go shopping or like saying that she was annoying for being bubbly, when
Mhm.
really those are just like ordinary traits. And like,
It's hypocritical too. Like they all
yeah,
shopped at the mask stand and no one
yeah,
complained about that. They all went to the fortune teller and no one complained about that. And that's shopping. Like,
yeah, it is.
and yet she's like, oh, I need new clothes so that we can like sell this impersonation thing that we're going to go
Mm-hmm.
into with the Velvet Cabaret. And yet that's the thing that gets backlash.
Yeah. Yeah, and again, like I'm glad that they've gotten a lot better about that sort of thing in like the future of Critical Role, but it
Mhm.
just like once again, like it was things like this, I think, that made it hard for me when like I've explained many times before, I've started with campaign 2, and when I went back to campaign 1, especially starting with these early episodes, that was one of the things that I actually found like more annoying than things like the audio quality and stuff, for just like these little
Totally.
pieces that like shouldn't be issues that they've become like more like socially aware of, because like even if shopping is a girly thing, what's wrong with things being girly?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
that's just like misogyny and sexism, and I don't think it was like serious, and I don't think it was meant that way. I think it was meant to be like an aside funny
Mhm.
like comment, but it's still just like a byproduct of our society and society at that time
Mhm.
too, because that was how many years ago? Like 9 years ago,
I think it
something
was
like that. They just sell.
2016, so 7, I think,
Yeah,
because we're
I'm
now
just
in
thinking
year
because I know
8.
Critical Role just celebrated their 8th anniversary.
Yeah, so I think it was about 7 years ago.
Yeah, and so it's like they're still finding their groove. Like obviously it's a different like understanding of all of those issues, but even then like those sorts of like sexist comments weren't, if I remember correctly, weren't even all that commonplace in
Mhm.
2016.
Yeah.
That would have been like more of a like the like aughts and like the maybe early 2010s of a
Yeah,
thing.
I mean, it's pervasive no matter what era you're in, but I was playing this mental exercise with myself when I was watching this first half of being like, what if it had been Zara instead of Kasha in this group?
Yeah.
What if it had been Lyra instead of Thorbeer in this group? Like, what if they had done more of a balance of gender expression between the characters within these two guest groups instead of, because I mean, by
Mhm.
itself, the Keyleth Tiberius Vax group is already slanted towards the masculine. And then
Yeah.
add 2 more masculine characters as guest
Mhm.
characters. So it's interesting.
Yeah, and it would be interesting when there was, like the original, just because on the fact that as a character, Vex does not get along easily with other people, it would have been interesting to see a situation because Keyleth, obviously, while being a little socially awkward, is very friendly and does get
Mhm.
along well with people. I think it would have been cool to see that sort of connection
Mhm.
between her and Zara or her and Lyra,
Yeah.
because I think they would have hit it off really well. I mean, Vex and them eventually did get to that point and have their moments of
Mhm.
respect, but it took longer because it's Vex. Obviously, no issue with that. That's her
Yeah.
character. But it would have been interesting to see with a more like friendly and open character how they would have like
I
hit it
mean,
off.
if we had had Keyleth and Lyra in the same party for these episodes, like they would have steamrolled for say like
Yeah,
Kasha's annoyance at Keyleth's
absolutely.
attitude, you
They
know?
would have just like brushed it off and would have like kept going, and it wouldn't have seemed like so unfair to have those comments said because they would have like brushed it off and turned it
Yeah,
into their own moment. But
yeah,
because it was just Marisha, then there was not that like Marisha can't stand up for herself because she most
yeah,
certainly can.
totally. Yeah.
And I don't think she took much issue with the comment
No.
herself, but it's still interesting to
Mhm.
see.
I mean, there's so many layers that we're working with Critical Role. Like
Hmm.
talked about this many times. Is like we think about the business and the brand as one level, and then we think
Hmm.
of like the players and like their careers and their likes and dislikes and experiences and all of that stuff and behaviors on another level. And then it's the characters level of like all of the different character dynamics that they have going on. And then we have the world at hand that all of these characters exist in, the setting, the environment, the other NPCs or PCs that they interact with in this world. And it's just interesting to be like, okay, well, what if we put this piece here? What would that look like? And what if we put this piece there? What would that look like? And I just don't think they're as self-aware at this stage on every
Yeah.
level, you know?
No, at this point it's still very much, oh, this is just the same game that we played at home and we're just now like showing it to people.
Mhm.
They haven't reached the part where they've like an awareness of like, oh, like this is actually like a consumable product we're putting out to people. The things that we are saying and doing have an impact more than the like immediate sphere
Mhm.
of like just the people around the table.
Mhm. Yeah, it's super fascinating. Like, I mean, jumping to personal experiences, I keep thinking about how much the group of people that's in a given situation. I mean, it's a circular relationship, right? Like the people affect the situation and the situation affects the people. And the people that you have is going to radically affect the experience of that situation. And
Absolutely.
I think that's what I find most fascinating in these episodes, because it is a mix up from the usual of what we have with these characters.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think they're being faced with novelty in a way that isn't necessarily comfortable to them, because there's an inherent sense of novelty in the D&D session, in the D&D system. Like you kind of need novelty for every session in order for it to be interesting. But they're also being faced with novelty in a way that they're not necessarily used to.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's interesting. What about you? Any personal experiences that come up?
Yeah, I think what I'm just thinking of is that, like, I mean, with how the bulk of our conversation has been about the comments about the shopping, it always baffles me when, like, things get fit, like, as a non-binary person myself, when things get fit into such, like, I think that's one of the reasons why I was so caught off guard by it, because in my mind, I am so past the, like, female male dichotomy and, like, one is better than the other or whatever, and I'm just on, like, I don't view the gender binary as a binary, especially with my own personal experiences, and especially because, like, a lot of the time in my experiences, obviously, like, sexism and misogyny still exists. Those are problems that still need to be dealt with and acknowledged.
Yeah.
But it's like, oftentimes I am more troubled by the existence of a binary and by the assumption that people make that I am female just because of the way that my body is and the way that, like, I present myself, because I'm not somebody who is, like, interesting in binding. I don't feel like gender dysphoria with my body as a whole. I'm most likely to feel it with my hair more than anything. But I'm like, so I still, it's interesting though, because I've got, like, all of these, like, complex thoughts, and the ways that I analyze gender are, like, all over the place, and, like, on so many different levels that it just, like, smacks me in the face when
Yeah.
some things are like, haha, girls like shopping, that's stupid. And it's
Yeah.
like, where, like, I'm like, I'm way past that. Why is this
Right.
still a thing?
Right.
Like,
No, I totally get what you're saying. Like, first off, for the hair comment, like my cutting all of my hair off was not gender expression related at all. Like, I cut my hair off because I was tired of fighting my clogged drains. Like, has nothing to do with my gender expression at all. And yet I get asked way more often now what my pronouns are than I was before I cut all my hair off. And that has been fascinating for me. But also when it comes to this whole concept of, like, being over these things, like, I experience that a lot when it comes to the queer fantasy romance that I'm writing. Like, I write novels within that genre, and a lot of my characters are very diverse on purpose. And so there's a lot of gender expressions, sexual expressions, but also, like, physical abilities. Like, I even deal with, like, abled versus differently abled individuals, stuff like that, ethnic diversity, that kind of things. And the plot in my books aren't necessarily driven by the drama, the tension that's created by those identities. Because so much of the alternative fantasy romance works out there, the plot is driven by that tension, because that tension does still exist in many areas of the world, and so many different people are still grappling with that tension. And so that is a very easy plot driver for writers to rely on, because we're used to grappling with that tension time and time and time again. But I almost wanted to present a world that was, like, post-tension. Like, the identities themselves isn't the plot driver. The plot driver in my books is, like, the character development that happens within the plot, you know? And it's very interesting to, like, literally, I think this was just yesterday, I was in a Zoom call with someone, or it might have been on Wednesday, and they were like, well, tell me about your story about being queer. And I was like, there is no story. I was like, I'm not really sure what you're wanting me to say here. I'm like, I mean, like, I recognized that I had different sexual expressions in high school, and then it evolved, and that's it. Like,
Yeah.
there is no story.
Mm-hmm.
And I think they kept expecting me to like launch into this, like, well, my parents disowned me and I got expelled, like, you know, like all of these
Yeah.
things. And I'm like, no, my parents, like, my dad hasn't even like mentioned it to me. Like,
Mm-hmm.
we've never literally had a conversation about it because I don't think he cares.
Yeah. And it's like interesting to think about. Like I think about like all those Tumblr posts that I see floating around that are just like representation isn't one size fits all. And for some people they do enjoy reading stories where the discrimination that they faced in real life is like mirrored in the story.
Yeah.
And then there are people who like just don't want to like think about it anymore and just want to like have the characters like, and it's like there's no like wrong way of doing it, but it's
Mhm.
also interesting to think about like all of these different like needs when it comes to representation and the way that everybody, because everybody is on like their own personal
Mm.
journey with
Yeah.
like grappling with these issues and figuring out how they relate to their identity depending on what boxes they may or may not fit in or how they choose to identify. And
Mm.
it's like a very, very complex thing. And like I don't know where I was going with this, but I mostly just that I was reminded of those Tumblr posts.
Yeah.
And but yeah, I can, and I've personally find times when I sometimes enjoy the stories with the like real world, like mirroring the discrimination that I face in real life, and then sometimes I just want it to be like, no, I am past that. Let's,
Yeah.
I don't want to have to think about that right now.
Yeah. And I just don't think Critical Role has gotten to the level of awareness to even start grappling with those issues yet.
No, no, not at all.
We definitely see this later on in the campaign. Like, Sam has a lot of growth to do as a
Mm-hmm.
person as this campaign goes on. Like,
Yeah.
Ryan has a lot of growth to do as a person as this campaign goes on. Marisha has a lot of
Mm-hmm.
growth as a person to do. Like, they just haven't gotten to that stage yet, and it is just a little jarring to have these early episodes remind us of that fact, especially considering how far they've come by now.
Exactly, exactly. And that's what catches me off guard is the difference because now they understand that
Mm-hmm.
like their show like can impact people depending on how they approach different like social issues and stuff like that. Whereas here, like I said earlier, they're just playing as if they were playing at home. So
Mm-hmm.
they haven't yet, it hasn't yet clicked for them that they need to make sure that the way that they are presenting things are ways that like are not going to harm real life minority groups.
Yeah.
And like I said, it was just like one like throwaway comment. Like I don't think it's like blew up an entire thing, but it still caught me off guard and it was still like, really? Like that's where we're at here? And it gave me a lot to think about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, I think Critical Role as a business and as a brand has had such a integral part in bringing diversity and inclusion to Dungeons and Dragons, which has been
Mm-hmm.
very stereotypically heteronormative, cisgendered white men space, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it just started to open up in the last decade, honestly.
Yeah.
And we're now seeing that with the Dungeons and Dragons movie that has come out,
Mm-hmm.
and with all of the different D&D groups like Dimension 20 and the drag queen D&D groups that now are
Yeah.
super popular, and all of these different approaches to a very traditionally privileged gaming system. And
Mm-hmm.
it kind of is just a little painful to go back to the beginning and be like, oh, they didn't start out this
No.
wide.
No, they definitely at this point still have a lot of learning to do.
Mm-hmm.
But it's cool to see how far they've come, and I guess it does say a lot about them that I can have started off somewhere else and then go
Yes.
back and be surprised and like because that shows growth.
Mm-hmm.
And really, like, I mean, again, I think of Tumblr posts that I've seen that when people talk about like being embarrassed of your former self or like feeling bad about like those things, those are actually like signs of like how far you've come.
Yeah.
Like, I think of my own life and like how far I've come in like understanding things because like I used to be very Christian. I was lucky in that the Christian circles that I was in were not nearly as bigoted as like the majority of Christian circles, but I still picked up on like a lot of that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Um and so like sometimes I get embarrassed like thinking back of like things I may have said to people like in ignorance more than out of like a malicious need, but still like I feel bad. But then I think about like how far I've come. And obviously I don't want to like brush aside if the things that I said have done real harm
Yeah.
to like people and discount that pain. But
Yeah.
also like I've come far enough that I can see that the things that I said were hurtful
Yeah.
and and that like and that says a lot. And I know I can learn from my past mistakes.
Mm-hmm.
And so in a way it's uncomfortable, but
Yes.
sometimes that discomfort is good because then you can
Yes.
see like, oh, I've moved on from the
Yeah.
person that I was then. Like
Yeah.
this makes me uncomfortable and that is a good thing. Like
Mm-hmm.
because I have reached the point where I am now.
I mean, it's the same thing as growing out of a pair of shoes. You know,
Yeah.
if you put on shoes from when you were 10, they're going to be uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And it's a good thing that you've grown out of your shoes that you wore when you were 10 years.
Yeah.
It's like you have to acknowledge like it's a time for a new pair of kicks.
Yeah.
We got to get with the times.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Well, that begs the question of like, what are we going to do now about this?
Yeah. Oh, that is a good question. I mean, already I've got like a lot to think about. I
Mm,
think just in general, like giving my past self a little bit more grace and not beating
yeah.
myself up for things that I have grown past.
Yeah.
Like I said, if somebody were to come to up to me and say, like, you know, like 5, 10 years ago, it really hurt me when I did this, I wouldn't like brush it aside. I would like validate and acknowledge their pain and apologize for it genuinely. But like I think just like when it's just me, like it does nothing for me to beat myself up for
Mm,
something that I've already learned from.
yeah.
I think it does better to focus on where I am now and focus on, you know, like where I can grow because society is constantly learning to like understand new things. And I'm sure that in 10 years we'll look back on like some of the current episodes coming back now and be like, yeesh, I can't believe that they did that
I mean, the
back
perfect
then.
example is their intro at the beginning of this campaign.
Oh,
That's a
absolutely.
perfect example.
Yeah.
For listeners, they did an intro for campaign 3 that was very well produced. They've obviously put a lot of thought and effort and time and money into this intro, and it was very well produced, but it did have colonialist overtones to it and
Mm-hmm.
featured those kind of archaeological explorers that you would associate with the 1920s, 1930s, like Egyptian archaeologists kind of type of people, which are colonialist archetypes. And they ended up getting a backlash from the community as a result of this intro,
Mm-hmm.
and they had to change it going into it. But I mean, that's a perfect example. It's like we are always going to make these types of mistakes. Like no
Mm-hmm.
one is going to be perfect 100% of the time, especially
Yeah.
considering how far Critical Role has grown from these episodes to the episodes that are airing
Mm-hmm.
now. They still have that much to grow in the episodes from now into the future. Like
Yeah,
there's
exactly.
still potential for growth at that point. And that's a perspective that we can take for ourselves too. Like, there's so much emphasis on doing the right thing, being perfect, especially in this world of like political correctness. Like, there's an emphasis on being as researched and knowledgeable and perfect in these concepts as possible, especially if you really want to try in these spaces. But I recognize that my privilege is always going to be a blind spot for me. And I can do my best to be as aware as possible of it when it does pop up into my day-to-day lives and my day-to-day interactions. But there's always room to grow. Like, one of my to-do lists that I have been dipping into over the past few years is anti-racism practices, and how to make sure that the things that I'm saying are not harmful and the things I'm doing are not harmful. And I think it's just a matter of having that consistent self-reflection practice as well, but also going back to in the beginning of surrounding yourself with people who will call you out on it.
Exactly. And like, I think like having grace for yourself and others, because it's true, like nobody can be like absolutely perfect when it comes to these things. And obviously if somebody's in a situation where like the things that somebody else is saying is actively harming them, then you absolutely should remove yourself from those situations. But if we were to like cancel and like blacklist everybody who like said a single thing wrong, then you would have nobody left. And so you kind of have to think about it and figure out who like figure out what situations are just being said out of ignorance from somebody who's like genuinely wanting and willing to learn, and who's saying things with no intention of changing, even if they are called out on it.
Yeah. I mean, that's honestly the key, is like, we've been seeing this cancel culture thing really pop up in the last few years. And there is really a difference between the people who mess up and are willing to fix those mistakes. Like, Brandon Sanderson as an author is one of those people who started out as a very conservative. He's of the Mormon church. And so he started out having some very harmful views about gay people and queer people and LGBTQ same-sex marriages and things like that. But over the years, he has learned, changed, and improved his positioning on those things, and now supports gay marriage 100%. And specifically puts queer relationships into his books, even though he's still part of the Mormon church. Like, there's that. And then there's people like Elon Musk who just gaslight you and make you think that you're actually in the wrong when he's the egomaniac.
Exactly. And I think like even among like the people who are changing and making a difference, it's something that like within yourself, like whether you have like the mental capacity to be there for that journey and help educate, or whether you're like, I will acknowledge and respect that you're going through this journey, but I cannot interact with this when you're at this point. And so I think it's like a complex thing that really is like hugely personal. But I think it's definitely far more complex than like, oh, you did this bad thing once, you're automatically canceled. Like, you need to stop and think critically about things and about whether it's something that is like, and I know we've talked about this so many times before, but whether it's something that's like J.K. Rowling, who like absolutely like should not interact with any of her works, or whether it's like something like an author who means well, but when you read it, it's like it's still harmful to you, so you choose not to engage with it. But that's like a personal choice that you make, and you don't make it into like a big thing that everybody needs to do this. To like, it's a scale from like there to from like J.K. Rowling to like whoever the most progressive alternative is.
Bernie Sanders. How about Bernie Sanders? We can always use him as the pinnacle of human achievement.
I'm afraid I'm Canadian. I know of Bernie Sanders, but I don't know enough about him.
I mean, if I have to think of non-problematic white men, he's at the top of the list. All right, anything you want to add before we wrap up for today?
I am good, I think. I think I have said everything for this episode.
Yeah, I mean, obviously we always have a lot more to say, but that's what more episodes are for. So these are powerful themes that we're talking about here in audience. We definitely encourage you to share your own stories and thoughts and insights with us as well. We'd love to know how Critical Role has shaped you in your own lives. So special thanks to Petall for joining me. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I always love talking about these things.
Yeah, so next time we'll be discussing Campaign 1, Episode 20, Part 2, and joining me again will be Petall. And I'm always looking for more co-hosts. And yes, so if you're interested in coming on this podcast and sharing your perspectives, please reach out to me. I'll send you the sign-up link. In the meantime, please comment, like, subscribe below, follow us on Tumblr at Sacred Reading CR for all the juicy updates. And until next time, may all beings be peaceful, may all beings be free, and always, always, always remember to love each other. Take care, guys.